You can take a seat or you can stand. That's okay. So we do have a number of questions prepared, but I'd like to first introduce each of the panelists. If you guys could go around and say just your name briefly, means on the screen, but a little bit more about yourself to the audience. And Brian, you can start us off.
All right, hi. If you haven't heard from me yet, I'm Brian Olson, Principal Software Engineer at Algorand. So I've been focusing on implementing a blockchain in the real world and trying to tune it up to high performance. So I will be speaking about that.
You probably already know more than you need to about me, but I'm on sabbatical at Algorand, and I can, if I crane my neck, you'll see him over the top of my display.
Once again, you probably know who I am already. I'm Steven, I'm founder of Taraxa. Anything that has nothing to do with technology, I'm the guy to blame for whatever happens.
So we definitely want to preface this by saying that the expertise represented on this panel is here for you all. So if you guys have any burning questions, please don't feel shy to just chime in. You can go ahead.
Sure. From a monetization or market opportunity, what would you say are the industries that have the greatest potential, and what would be some of the use cases? I think, Steve, you touched on some of them, but like from a macro level, what industries are going to have the most potential?
Okay, that's very interesting. So what I'm going to say is guaranteed to be incorrect, because I don't think anyone in this space right now has the right answer. So from a macro view, I see blockchain as a we have business models where business partners don't trust each other. That's potential for fraud. Supply chain potential for fraud. I think this young lady here mentioned insurance, tons of insurance fraud. We would actually love to find out more use cases in insurance. Auto insurance, maybe weather insurance for agriculture, maybe that have claims that are potentially dependent on sensor data, for example. So for me, we're very interested in devices, and because devices, at least today, right, before we have true AI, by that time devices become non-deterministic. But today, devices are still largely deterministic, and commitments made by devices are generally much more trustworthy than commitments made by people, right? If a person writes something into the blockchain, then who knows, what that person's thinking about, what his motivations are. But devices, if it makes a commitment, if it hasn't been hacked, then you can largely trust that its behavior is deterministic. So anywhere where you're trying to audit, trying to prevent fraud, I think that's a very, very good use case for blockchain. But that's my perspective.
Yeah, just to kind of go off of that, more question pointed at Stephen and Brian. What kind of challenges are you experiencing from both the technical or commercial/business perspective when dealing with real-world clients?
Well, I can speak to some of the technical challenges. One of the technical challenges is if you're building a global network, then at some point you run into the speed of the internet, and it just takes half a second to get a packet from Sydney to London sometimes. And so how many round trips does your protocol have if you're running an agreement protocol? And that's just kind of, the speed of the internet have if you're running an agreement protocol. And that's just kind of, the speed of the internet becomes a limiting factor, and you will have to deal with how much bandwidth do you want, how much latency do you want, and these kind of engineering trade-offs.
Okay. I'll talk about some of the business problems, and there are many. So the first challenge is obviously nobody knows what blockchain is. And if you walk into a room talking about blockchain, typically they're thinking, oh, so you're going to sell me some Bitcoin? No, that's not what I do. So number one is that huge understanding gap of what blockchain even is. Another very common problem that we run into, once they do gain some understanding of blockchain, they started getting very worried about this wallet, right? The fact that you have a private key that you absolutely cannot lose. Because if you lose it, you're screwed. Right? And so they say, well, we can't have that. We have to have password recovery. Well, no, because if I can recover your password, that means I own you, right? I own everything you own, right? So businesses are typically very uncomfortable with that. So this is a classic trade-off, right? You have to trade off immutability, trustlessness. The other side of that coin is responsibility, right? If you want something to be immutable, you want things to be trustless, you want something to be centralized, you have to take the responsibility of that burden. And most of the time, businesses, actually all the time, businesses are not willing to take that responsibility. So we have to come up with workarounds that make it not truly decentralized, but still try to make sure that we can still earn their money. So that's another very practical concern that people sort of get into. And of course, there are lots of legal concerns as well. Can I hold coins? My accountant's going to kill me because there are no GAAP rules for holding coins. Like, what am I supposed to do with this, right? And lots of thorny issues there as well. Typically, what we're going to propose is sort of, why don't you just not worry about this? You just pay us, regular old dollars or yen, things you understand. And it just works. Don't worry about how it works. And in the back end, we probably just fund their accounts with coins, so we don't have to worry about it. We've been talking about maybe, especially for places where legal status is ambiguous, such as the U.S. Maybe you have to put it somewhere offshore. Lots of complications, right? So these are just a tiny subset of the things that we run into.
Yeah, to dovetail off of that, a question for Professor Herlihy. You're an advisor to multiple projects, including Algorand and Taraxa. What types of real-world challenges do you see these projects dealing with, and how are they overcoming them? And this could be a technical or non-technical answer.
Well, I think from a general technical point of view, the best is the enemy of the good. So when you write an academic paper, it's easy to say, oh, I have a truly awesome solution to this little corner case, and isn't it elegant? But when you're dealing with a company that needs to ship something and get things working, then you probably shouldn't spend that much time working about the corner case that you worry about the main thing. And this requires kind of a gear change from the usual mentality that you have as an academic researcher. So I think it's definitely the case that you need to come up with innovative solutions to hard problems, but you have to resist the urge to make them perfect in some sense. There isn't a nasty collection of referees who are going to decide whether your paper's accepted. It's really more there are all of these people who need a solution to their problem. And providing something that is 80% perfect is much better than providing something that is 90% perfect but takes a year longer.
Zooming out to the more general blockchain space, and this is really a question for anyone on the panel, there seems to be a lot of blockchain projects out there. What, in your opinion, constitutes meaningful differentiation between these projects? Essentially the thing that helps them to win in the market.
Yeah, I'll jump in a little on that. So Algorand's killer app is that it can do 1,000 transactions per second across a global network with 5-second latency. Blockchain is running about 6 transactions per second with an hour latency. So we think that's really great. And I guess then the business case side of that is, okay, we've built the best technology, and now we have the same problem as any other startup. How do we get anyone to use it? But other projects I've looked around at are innovating on the scripting side. There's one that's using WebAssembly as their smart contract language because that would be more adoptable or run faster. There are other projects doing other innovations on the scripting side. There are other projects that are specifically trying to do a stable coin tied to real money. There are other projects that are specifically about doing a name registrar thing. A name coin is an interesting thing that is all about organizing data for that particular app. So there's a lot of kind of things that you can do once you have this distributed agreement pattern where no one necessarily trusts each other, but they do trust that the network on average is trustworthy.
Does anybody else want to speak to that?
mean, I can say something about that. I mean, I think at this point, I mean, one of the probably the key differentiators. I think the blockchain space is where technology is really running like so much faster, right, than sort of the business side of things, right? This sort of reminds us of, you know, when the internet started happening and sort of the infrastructure actually moved way faster, right, in the application. People are like, why do you need optic fibers? Like, why on earth will anyone need this much bandwidth, right? Like, that's crazy. So I think one of the key competitive advantages today is actually just purely on execution, right? So we're talking about both technical execution. I think, you know, Algorand is amazing that the first day they released their network, it actually just works. It didn't like fail or anything, but that's amazing. I haven't seen another one like that. There's also about, you know, executing on, like I said, bridging the gap between technology as well as business, right? There's just a lot of applications that seem like they will make sense for blockchain, but if you dig several layers deep, it may not make so much sense. So you have to basically be able to iterate very, very quickly, finding sort of exactly the right use cases.
Yeah, there's many activities that involve blockchain that have nothing to do with each other. So I've worked for 3 projects the last 2 years, worked in the sense of actually showing up at an office and doing things. I worked for Oracle for a while on their blockchain project. I worked for Facebook on the Libra project, and now I'm on sabbatical working at Algorand. And each of these 3 projects had entirely different goals and approaches. And pretty much the only thing they had in common was the use of the term blockchain. And maybe at some level the technology was fairly similar. But, you know, Oracle was worried about databases. They wrote all their programs in Haskell, believe it or not. You know, Facebook, you can read about in the newspapers. You know, they're excited about the fact that they have 2.2 billion possible customers off the bat. You know, they're primarily interested in underbanked people in third world countries. And then, you know, there's Algorand, which is looking at a completely different market. So I think, you know, the fact that someone says that they're doing blockchain doesn't tell you anything about what they're actually up to in some sense.
Shifting gears a little bit.
Oh, there's a question.
Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to ask about legislation. Are there, you mentioned that there are some groundwork for legislation in Japan, God knows there's none here. I was just wondering, how should governments approach controlling this environment to prevent malicious activity and facilitate the best that the technology can provide? Or are there better examples out there existing?
Well, I'm not a politician, and I have no influence over them. So this is going to be, you know, Stephen's opinion. I don't know why. I mean, I can guess why Japan is the way. I mean, you know, there are lots of little items, right, where anything's legal. You know, that's great. But Japan is the 3rd largest economy in the world, and it's legal there. So I think what might be different from, you know, between Japan and, say, you know, U.S. and China is that, like I said before, it feels like amongst the elite, right, the you know, the political elite, the business elite in Japan, they really feel like they missed out, right, on the internet. They've been sort of they're very, very far behind the rest of the world, right? So they need to catch up, and they see blockchain as something that could be an area just through, you know, the sheer fact that they have clear legislative definition for it. It could grow, you know, very quickly. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, right? Because, you know, in you know, just unclear legislation is even worse than clear legislation. So whereas in the U.S. and China, I don't think there's that feeling at all. I mean, the internet is thriving very, very quickly and very well in these 2 countries. And there are lots of huge centralized platforms that are hugely dominant. And, you know, of course, you've got to consider sort of incumbent interests as well. Maybe there are lots of financial interests in these types of countries that don't want to see blockchain system. Right? You know, I'm just guessing here, right? So, how should how should a government approach this technology? First of all, governments, I don't think any government's going to like something like blockchain. In fact, I don't think governments like cryptography, period. In Australia, they just released a new law that says all cryptography needs to have a backdoor to the government. And people on Twitter are like, does the government in Australia understand math? Like this doesn't work. So government doesn't like what it cannot control, right? So I don't think any government will like it. How would they approach it? Well, they have to recognize that adopting this technology is, net it's going to be more beneficial, right, from an economic perspective, from a social perspective, I think, than having something that they can fully control. Sorry, I know you also have another question. I keep blabbering out, but this just, like, I see decentralization as something that's absolutely critical for the next iteration of human civilization. Because the way that we're seeing large corporations grow, large organizations, one CEO says something, everyone does it. Planned economies are inefficient because the guy making the decisions have, like they just have imperfect information, right? So as corporations become larger and larger, and that's just simply because technology gets more complex, we get into worse and worse decision making. I mean, I used to be a strategy consultant, to large multinational corporations. This is going to piss off a lot of my former clients. I'm astounded at the decisions these people are making. I'm like, people are just getting lucky, right? If you're making a good decision, you just got lucky. There's no reason to believe that, corporate managers that have 15 layers above, the people that are actually doing work. How is it making the right decision? Right? So, organizational structure, the way our economic activities are structured, decentralization is absolutely critical. Because if the way it keeps going and technology gets more complex, pretty much the entire world is going to end up with one single corporation. And that's not going to be very good. That's not going to be very good. So if the governments understand that, then hopefully they'll be more friendly towards this idea of decentralization.
I think we had a question right there, and then we can go around. Go ahead, sir. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my question would be mostly focused on the market side. So since this decentralized world is like involving to multi-countries, multi-continents, and multicultural, so when we're facing the user experience, so how are you guys handling that? Because, for instance, the same app that we're using today here and in China will be two different versions, and consider you guys are doing multi-countries in business. What's your takeaway on user experience and what's your strategy towards that, and how that could be boosted mass adoption following on the future?
So, at some point, if you're running a node on a blockchain, you're running the same software anywhere. If you want to have the consumer level ecosystem beyond that of wallets and things, that will probably have to be, those tools might be a local exchange that converts the local currency into the net currency, the cryptocurrency. And there will have to be one of those in your country that you can talk to and do business with under your own local regulations. But if you just want to, have some Bitcoin or Ethereum or algos, you can just do that, right? And no one has so far figured out how to put successful laws on math, and software just has a way of getting around, even when, all of those old regulations about who can export cryptography, that never really worked. So software gets around. You can just do it. And some of the patterns out there, like you can implement a cross-chain swap with no broker, with no other exchange fees other than 2 transactions on each side. That's a common pattern, and that is kind of breaking the mold. So it says there's no gatekeeper. You can just do this. And so if you can locally buy Bitcoin or Ethereum or algos or Dogcoin or whatever, and then trade it for something else, you're in. Right now it's, like encrypted email always was, a tool for super nerds who know how to use it. And then also some people will make a consumer level wallet. So That's where we are. And I guess the business is there a business case for making this actually a consumer thing where I can go to a garage sale and buy your antique thing for 300 all whatever coin. I would love to do that, but we don't have that yet because, I don't know, something about the end user part of the ecosystem is missing. There's a really easy thing that makes it usable.
I would like to know about the consensus protocol used in Taraxa in comparison with proof of work in terms of security, probabilistic security, or also the numbers of malicious users you can tolerate.
Okay. So I'm going to draw heavily from those papers that I talked about, Ghost, Spectre, and Phantom. So in those papers, what they have, they're going with a block DAG topology because they're seeing that for a single chain topology, if you increase throughput, you necessarily sacrifice security. And naive ways to increase throughput are things like bigger blocks, which propagates slower and gives you more forking and branching, and you end up sacrificing security. If you make many more blocks, also gives you more branching, which again sacrifice security. So the block DAG topology allows actually you to increase the number of blocks generated without sacrificing security. The specific without sacrificing security in the sense that it increases branching because it's inclusive. So each block, instead of having one single parent, it points to all the valid tips along the DAG that it thinks is valid, right? Yeah.
When you're saying you are not sacrificing security, you mean that you are still using the proof of work in the Bitcoin style, or the change?
No, we're not using proof of work. So this gets you. So proof of work. Okay, a lot of people they talk about, well, what's your consensus, proof of work or proof of stake? First of all, I mean the word consensus, and these two are much more technical than I am, so definitely correct me if I'm wrong. A consensus is a set of rules, right? Proof of work is like it's like a thing that solves a puzzle. Like that's what it is. Proof of stake is an economic incentives system that gives you eligibility to vote on things, right? So proof of work just so happens that solving this puzzle also gives you randomness, and it also gives you a predictable delay, right? So these are things that solving this puzzle does. So we're not doing that because we feel like too much energy consumed, not a great thing. So we're not going to do that, but then we still have to replicate the randomness and the predictable delay. So sorry, that's sort of an aside. We're not using proof of work. We're using proof of stake in combination with several other algorithms to make sure we replicate the functionalities. Going back to your other question, in terms of the security, another interesting thing about the block DAG is that the single chain mechanism has this, at least on Bitcoin and Ethereum, has this problem of, someone can secretly build a chain, right? They have to get pretty lucky, right, and have lots of hashing power. But if they have minority hashing power, they can secretly build a chain and publish it, and that overrides, sort of what the honest majority has been doing. So they're trying to solve this problem. So the reason why they're able to do that is because the dishonest or malicious minority is highly coordinated, right? They're very coordinated on doing exactly this one thing, whereas the majority is uncoordinated, right? So they don't know what's going on. They're just going around seeing which is the longest chain. So they're posing this problem: how can the honest majority win over the dishonest minority, right? So that's why they have these. That's why they have these pointers that are pointing to multiple parents, right? These are essentially votes, right? Basically, the honest majority at any given moment is voting on the blocks that they've seen, right? These pointers, right? These are votes. So that if you build something in secret and publish it later, I'm sorry, no one's seen these yet. They're not getting voted, and you cannot get ordered before the block that you're trying to attack, right? So there's this block DAG. There's a system of point referencing to multiple previous blocks. We also have a system of ordering, because one of these sorry, this is going to take a really long time to explain, by the way. So I'm just going to shorten it. We also have an ordering mechanism that depends on the Ghost protocol in terms of calculating weights for each block, and the weights are calculated by how many people are pointing to it. So when you're pointing to the previous blocks, one of the blocks is special in that it is the terminal block on the heaviest weighted chain, main chain, or we call it anchor chain inside the DAG. So the reason why we have that is in asynchronously, we're ripping off of Algorand's awesome, consensus protocol. We're periodically finalizing specific blocks, right? So we're saying this block now gets infinite weight, and the blocks between two blocks that have infinite weight have deterministic ordering. So that's, in a nutshell, very poorly explained, I think, our consensus. Yeah.
Excuse me, I have a question. When can we be at t plus 0
When can we be at t plus 0?
for the panel? Transaction
I'm
plus
sorry, I don't understand what that means.
Is that a question about launching a new technology, or what?
No, just in my experience, I was in a stock exchange and we did t plus 0.
I don't understand in what context.
Transaction.
Closing,
You mean instant settlement?
closing transactions.
Instant settlement.
Instant settlement for securities or some other kind
Oh,
of
okay.
transaction.
Securities, property, custody.
Right, so like the convention on blockchain is you wait for 6 more blocks or about an hour, and then you say, oh yes, this transaction is really, really final. I think that's what you're talking about.
Exactly, with a smart contract.
Right.
T plus 0.
So, and
T
then,
plus 3.
right, so on Algorand, and I think probably also on, because of the differing agreement protocol, when it's agreed to, it's done. So there's no way to fork the chain. So so on Algorand, the answer is 5 seconds. You get back from your local node, yes, that was committed, it's in a block, the block is everywhere in the world within 5 seconds, and then everyone has that block and everyone sees it's committed and it's done. And there's no way to go back and say, no wait, actually history was this. That's just forbidden by the protocol and the algorithm. And there's lovely papers on that, but that's the property that you get.
I have a friend who had a startup who was trying to go from T plus 5 to T plus 3 a few years ago. And he reported that the problems were not so much technical problems as regulatory problems with big players who wouldn't get on board, that the players didn't actually talk to each other and want to cooperate. So a lot of the problem there is just getting, not that we can't commit transactions really quickly, as we just heard.
In 2020, is there any killer app? I mean, we had CryptoKitties, you worked on Libra. Is there something that the masses may start to embrace so that more people start to understand what blockchain can do?
Well, people think that blockchain has to be popular in order to be successful.
They have to understand it.
Yeah, but I think a lot of the really sweeping effects of blockchain may not be visible. So I think this Walmart now tracks their mangoes through a supply chain blockchain, so that if you get sick from a mango, they can figure out who's responsible. And of course, the people who eat mangoes in Boston aren't aware of this, but they may be marginally healthier for it. So I think that there are a lot of situations where blockchain is going to work in the background. Finance, the rich people are going to get much richer using blockchain technology. And again, this is not something that requires popular adoption to have a big effect on society.
The other guys, you got a thought?
Great question.
Yeah, I mean, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Professor Herlihy that I think blockchain is like it's interesting that the fact that we're talking about blockchain it means it's hugely immature. This is like us going around talking about what like concrete. Like when's the last time everyone sat in a room? Let's talk about concrete. Fascinating technology. It just works, right? It's like it's part of some other thing that you use that you don't even think about, right? this whole idea of trying to create like blockchain-specific, mass-adopted things is super hard. I mean, you go to like the best games or the best mass-adopted consumer application with blockchain. These are just like betting games, right? Dice rolls, right? I mean, think about it. If you're like a regular consumer, you go on a website. It's like EOS bet or fair win or whatever. What's the first thing that tells us? Oh, you gotta have a wallet. Well, what's a wallet? Well, okay, you learn what a wallet is. Well, you gotta go buy some coins. Where do I get coins? Well, you gotta go register on this exchange. Oh, fill out 20 pages of KYC and then buy some coin. And by that time, I'm like, sorry, man, you can forget this game. I mean, every app I download on my phone, it has exactly 3 seconds to impress me, or else it's getting deleted. Right? No wonder this is not getting mass adopted, because it's exposing all this weird complexity to the consumer. They don't need to know about all this stuff, right? If you're exposing this complexity to people, of course there's no adoption. That's a no-brainer, right? Like when I'm playing a game, I'm not like, oh man, I wonder what TCP/IP stack is using. I gotta track the packet. What does the header say? Like, no, nobody cares, right? So it's too much complexity. That's why they're not adopting. Yeah.
How do you make it simpler?
By making it invisible.
Yeah, just build it into an application and so that people see the application and they don't see what's under it. And has everyone seen the NIST decision flow chart on whether or not you need a blockchain? The National Institutes of Standard and Technology produced this lovely 80-page paper about blockchain technology for dummies. And in it there's this one-page flow chart of, do you need a blockchain? And it compares it to a whole bunch of other technologies like emailing around spreadsheets or traditional SQL databases. And spoilers, you probably don't need a blockchain, just to de-hype it a little bit. But the thing is, the trust model is where we don't necessarily trust each other, but we do trust that we use the same software, and then we have a protocol whereby we trust the aggregate network. That's the powerful new feature here. And so the supply chain thing, where we have many vendors who don't necessarily trust each other. I've heard lovely stories about medical provenance, where you say, yes, these drugs are legit because I can track that they went from the manufacturer to the distributor to the hospital. Great. Yeah, those kinds of things.
Well, another example is that before blockchain, basically leveraging works is how we buy flight tickets and how OTA works, right? But of course, after blockchain, the company doesn't really need to have secret control on how to share a database, but before it also worked. So what do you think about that? Adaptations?
I guess, sure. Another thing you can do with a blockchain is it might become a kind of distributed exchange. So, let's say all of the airlines got together and they didn't necessarily want to, give all of their data to ITA or whatever the company is this year. So they made themselves a collective market for airline seats. And they post their seat offers for routes on this, and they accept bids and purchases on this. That is totally something that could happen. But the easier business model is, oh well, we'll just give $10 to ITA for every ticket that we sell. Who knows what will actually happen? Maybe now that the technology is more possible, more of these will happen. I don't know where the first ones will be.
Another thing is about the popularity of blockchain. Do you believe it's going to be the next infrastructure, like how the internet works? But the downside is that big monopolies would be unwilling to share all the data on this open platform, that they basically lose monopoly power of the data. Do you think they're going to migrate on blockchain? Do you think all business transactions might, in the future, ever only happen in blockchain?
No. Blockchain obviously is big. Bitcoin, if nothing else, has proved that there is a demand for a market for this kind of thing. And Ethereum did its own innovation and proved that there's a market for that. That's great. And so now other companies are coming along and saying, great, we can do it better. And so, Algorand has a faster blockchain that's cheaper per transaction. Great. So there will be those incremental kind of improvements, and there will be new applications of, it's a design pattern. You can apply this design pattern but it's not going to fit everything. It will be big, but it's not going to be the biggest thing. You know, I don't know that like global demand for blockchain will exceed the global revenue of Google anytime soon, because Google is a big business. It's going to do a whole lot. So, you know, is global demand for blockchain cryptocurrencies going to exceed your local bank? Maybe. But is it going to, you know, be threatening Chase? No.
Well, I mean, going back to what Brian said, it's a technology for very, very specific use cases, right? It's it's not something that's going to replace everything, right? You know, to your question about whether or not these big guys are going to start giving up their data, well, that's not likely happening anytime soon, right? First of all, there's no financial interest for them to do that. Second of all, you know, people complain, oh no, Facebook's no good, it leaks my data. Guess what? Everyone's still using Facebook, right? You know, there are lots of projects out there who want to build a decentralized Facebook. Good luck, right? I mean, that's going to be a hard uphill battle. Legislation may help. You know, maybe I don't know, 15 years later, you know, you can't just randomly collect people's data anymore. That could be illegal. I don't know. That could happen. But fundamentally, right? I mean, this once again goes back to what Brian said. It has to make sense. Like, it has to make business sense, right? Blockchain is not. It's not the same as the internet. Not even close. It's a specific technology that solves specific sets of problems, right?
Question. Blockchain technology is still evolving. You don't know which one will be existing 5 years from now. What's your suggestion for the developers to handle this kind of uncertainty?
Depends on what kind of application you're developing. Let's say you're developing a regional market for some kind of commodity. Take an open source blockchain, modify it to your purposes, deploy it on your own servers. You wind up deploying it on the servers of the various parties that are collaborating in their kind of trusting each other way. And then you're good to go. You never have to change anything. You can run that until all of the servers collapse and catch fire in 20 years from now. If you want to, otherwise you're just going to ride the wave from each new thing as it comes and goes. You know, maybe Bitcoin, maybe we have reached peak Bitcoin and it's on its way down. I don't know. Maybe something else will move on and come in next. It depends on what your application is. If you're trying to build smart contracts to facilitate some kind of transaction, you're going to do that on whatever network has the most users right now. If you want to build a blockchain supply chain management solution, you might spin up your own, and then you're running your own. It doesn't matter.
I think there was a question over here that I missed. Did you have a
Just
question?
follow up on this question, because I think it seems like a lot of what I've been hearing is that blockchain is more of an infrastructure play, and but I feel like there's a lot of focus on consumer. Like, we need mass adoption. We need everyone using crypto. We need everyone paying peer-to-peer payments in crypto. And yet, kind of, is it accurate to characterize the way you kind of look at crypto or blockchain in general as just infrastructure that's under the hood and no one actually cares about it, the way you mentioned with UCP?
My answer would be yes, since that's what I said. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why there's this idea of mass adoption. I mean, I think that's probably mostly driven by retail investment. So the crypto world has it's schizophrenic, right? So there are different parts of it that are doing different things. There's a secondary market, which is purely speculative. You talk about PE ratio, price-earning ratio. There's no earning, so it's just price that's just going whichever way, right? So a lot of the dialogue in the crypto world today is driven by the secondary market, and most retail investors in general, retail investors are not knowledgeable about the technology, about the business side, about whatever. If you're not in a specific field, you're just thinking like, well, how can we get mass adoption? The most obvious thing people can think about is, well, what if everyone started using it, right? I mean, this is how I look at it, right? Because if I knew nothing about technology X, the most naive way is, what if every single person used it, right? But every single person using it doesn't mean every single person needs to be aware that they're using it, and it's, I think that's the reason why we're having this very weird conversation is because it's like an infrastructural technology that somehow has economic value, right? And it just floated way up, like 10 layers up into the public, consciousness, and it captured a lot of imagination, and everyone thinks that everyone should be using it on a daily basis, when in reality it might be the case that yes, they use it on a daily basis, but they shouldn't be aware of it.
Think about how many electric motors are in this room, and think about the last time you thought about any of them. So in the same way, blockchain, if it's successful, will migrate into infrastructure and you won't think about it. I'm confident predicting that 10 years from now, something called blockchain will be driving a lot of applications. Whether it looks like today's blockchain is hard to say. If you look, for example, at Libra's blockchain, it has no blocks and it's not really a chain. But they call it a blockchain because otherwise people wouldn't know what they were talking about. So it's a, I don't see people wandering around talking and thinking about blockchains all the time in the no foreseeable future, but they will be probably using them without knowing or caring that they're there.
So you don't see anybody saying you need to understand internet in order to be able to use it?
Nobody needs to understand how transmissions work to drive a car.
Are there any more questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm a policy nerd, so I'll stick up for government here. So when it comes to things like, tracking shipments and whether it's mangoes or, some people are trying to use it for, tracking diamonds and exchanges, and I see all the use for that. But when it comes to cryptocurrency, I still don't understand. I know you said Libra's not quite blockchain, but if it were engineered that way, I still don't think people understand that it's not. As Facebook has basically become a government, and now they've got, peasants with pitchforks at the door, and King Zuckerberg doesn't understand why people are mad at him. It's kind of like, welcome to history, sir. You should have finished those classes. So basically, when it comes to Bitcoin, if you wanted to deploy something widely as sort of a utility in society, someone has to be managing it. Federal Reserve, the central bank. So for uses like that, like Bitcoin, I don't see how it's ever going to become, throughout a whole society, unless there's someone, a trusted entity where you can, complain to it, and there's a.
But thinking about Bitcoin kind of distorts things. So I personally have a love-hate relationship because although I'm not a big Bitcoin fan, it brings a lot of undergraduates to my door that I can put to work on research projects because they're super excited about it, and I try not to discuss politics with them. But almost every other project has some form of governance. Governance for blockchains is a huge problem that nobody really understands, and some do better than others. Bitcoin itself, every time there's a technical dispute, it splits like some Marxist party into 5 or 6 different pieces, each of which claims to be the one true Bitcoin. And this is obviously kind of not terribly sustainable. Ethereum is much better governance. They despite the claims of being decentralized, if they want to make a change, they do a hard fork and everyone moves on. The others, Tether at least claims to be backed by dollars in the bank. Libra has some kind of basket. Algorand has a complicated thing which I don't have time to explain, but these are backed in various, sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle ways. So I think the field is kind of evolving into something that is much more responsible and way less crazy and sensationalistic than Bitcoin.
So just a quick follow-up to that. So what's the financial, and say if you're a miner in the blockchain and you're using computing resources and electricity, what's the incentive? What impact do you get for being part of the, just a little piece of
Well, this is different for every chain. Every technology has a somewhat different answer to that. So I can't really give you a generic.
I actually want to talk about that specific point. So, you have all these different actors currently interacting in the market today. So, in order to maintain, in the current world, right, in order to maintain a decentralized network, you have to have disparate parties who are not connected, right? Ideally, you have conflicting interests, right? Running nodes, right? So that's how you get a decentralized network. So right now, what you're seeing is that node operators or the people that are putting up resources in staking or whatever other way, they're asking for a return, right? They're asking for a return for their investment because why else would they be doing this? And that's a really good question. Why else would they be doing this, right? So it's my opinion that later on, if we have large-scale applications actually in place, the companies and the businesses that are running these applications, who are also running the nodes, they're not going to seek a return for running those nodes. It's cost of doing business, right? I'm not going to seek a return for like a motor that I installed in my office or air compressor inside. And that's just that thing is part of a bigger thing that gives me a return, right? So one day maybe when there are lots of value-added applications powered by blockchain, node operators will be the people that are actually using them, and they won't be asking for a return, right? And then you have successfully decoupled decentralization from coin price. Now, this is actually a very, very critical goal, I think, for the space to reach, right? I mean, I think Vitalik earlier this year finally begrudgingly admitted on Twitter that Ethereum's price actually is critical to maintaining the security and decentralization of the Ethereum network, right? That's true today. But if Ethereum had a killer app, that's embedded inside corporations, maybe that wouldn't be the case. So the thing that we're seeing right now, I feel like is a transitional period.
So back to this point, asking about how blockchain used as a currency, because I was thinking about how mining power can ever be translated into human labor as a currency if it's a public currency. I don't see the possibility of translation, so do you feel blockchain or Bitcoin is more like a peer-to-peer transaction rather than it's ever going to be like a public currency? Did you understand?
So there's an exchange rate that's possible.
Yeah.
I can buy, a Bitcoin is worth some hundreds or thousands of dollars, and then we trade around fractional Bitcoins.
But to the fundamentals of the currency, right? Like how dollars backed up with gold before, and how we determine the gold value by mining it, right? But how do you translate the actual computation of power to human labor?
So there's nothing like working at a cryptocurrency blockchain company to make you realize that money is all based on belief, and that money is worth something because we believe it's worth something. Little green slips of paper. Yes, I believe I can get coffee for this. Great. And so the psychological aspect of making end users believe in that is mysterious and slightly magical.
Without the secondary market, without the speculation and stuff, how do you believe Bitcoin can ever be a public currency without the backup of actual,
Bitcoin specifically is going to always be its own special magic. And other things that are also traded on blockchain technologies might, like stable coins and other things with other financial backing instruments, where they have some kind of traditional asset in the mix somewhere. Those will be a different story. If I say I'm selling shares of my house for one house coin and there are 250 house coins on the market, then suddenly there's a weird market for that, and that's backed by something. Is that a good idea? I don't know. That will probably happen. Someone will probably do that.
Are there any more questions? Okay, we might actually transition into the raffle. If you want to transition into the raffle.
So this is the end of our panel discussion?
Yeah.
Sure.